Roman Reigns, Logan Paul, and pro wrestling. In this episode, we get into all of it. Logan Paul is a YouTuber with over 23 million subscribers and is known for his controversy in sports as well as on YouTube. Now he faces Roman Reigns, one of the largest antagonists in WWE history and the longest running champion of the sport. This Saturday, November 5th, they fight. Mike Sleazy brings us behind the scenes and uses his many years as a veteran, commentator, producer, and even wrestler to help us understand what is it actually like in pro wrestling? What does it actually mean to be a pro wrestler? What is the context to understand this Logan Paul versus Roman Reigns fight that's coming up? And gives us everything in a digestible format. So let's stay curious, learn about Mike, pro wrestling, Logan versus Roman Reigns, and more in this episode of the Learning With Lowell podcast. The first question I want to ask, and I want to just throw it out to one of our longtime listeners, Brenton, if you're listening, these questions, this first two are for you. So there's a slap that's heard around the world. John Stossel got himself slapped. So what is this? Why is this interesting? And why did he get himself slapped?
Okay, so John Stossel is known for being... Okay, I may have to say this right off the bat because I do have a little bit of color in my language sometimes. So forgive me if that tends to be an issue.
No, have fun.
So what had happened was he was egging some professional wrestlers on behind the scenes. Now, in professional wrestling, as a general rule, what you see in the ring and what you see backstage are usually two different things. And we'll probably explore that a lot more as this episode goes through our normal cadence. But he was talking with a gentleman named David Schultz. And David Schultz was working in 1984, 85 for WWF, now the WWE, but back then it was still called the World Wrestling Federation. And John Stossel decided to go up to this man right after a match, right after he had gotten, I don't want to say hurt, but it hurts when you go through a professional wrestling match. There's a lot of adrenaline. There's a lot of anger that gets thrown about through there, especially if something didn't go right or something of that nature. John Stossel decided to go up to this professional wrestler and say, "Hey, is this stuff fake?" And to David's credit, or not credit, he didn't take it well. And he slapped him in the face and said, "Hey, does this feel fake to you?" That's an open face slap. We do this all the time in the ring. And it's absolutely true. That does happen a lot. And the point of the matter was that while, yes, the outcomes of the match are predetermined, it's still a physical activity that's happening. It's no different than two actors doing a fight scene. And in fact, it's very close to that, except the difference is that in a movie, everything is move for move done for the camera, and sometimes in multiple takes. Whereas in professional wrestling, you get one take, you get one shot, and if something goes wrong, something goes wrong. You got to make it up as you go. And in some cases, especially with certain people like, I'm trying to think of a good example of this. Macho Man Randy Savage was a good example of the opposite, where he wanted every single move called out every single time. There are a lot of people out in the professional wrestling business, especially on the indies, where they will have a general idea of what to do and then call it in the ring. So maybe today we're going to do a couple of punches and then a kick, or sometimes it'll be a couple of punches and then maybe a hip toss or something like that. It's always different for them. Other people, they want it specific. But in terms of this particular circumstance, John Stossel, being the general jackass that he is, tried to, tell this professional wrestler high on adrenaline and probably some steroids too. We won't confirm or deny that, especially when it was the mid 80s. But yeah, it was stupid, and you got slapped in the face over it. And it caused a lot of issues, and they got sued. Vince got sued, I believe, at the time. I think they settled for an undisclosed sum or some ridiculous thing. But yeah, that's pretty much what it was.
How do you call it in the ring? Is there like is there like a subtle, like in terms of preparing for a match? Do they rehearse it beforehand and that's what's calling in the ring, or is there some way that they let each other know what's going to happen as they move through the arc of their characters?
Okay, and this goes back to, it depends on
Hmm.
where you're working, who you're working with, how close you know these guys. Um, as a general rule, especially on the independent scene versus a place like WWE where it's like everybody knows each other because they're constantly working each other. WWE has 300 dates, give or take a year, when they
Hmm.
go out on the road and do this stuff. It may be a little bit less since the pandemic, but it's about that right now. When you call something in the ring, you're usually got an idea of what the booker, the person who's in charge of the promotion, wants to have happen at the end. So, for instance, I'm working Joey, Brooklyn Joe. Okay, I'm working Brooklyn Joe over there, and the finish of the match is Brooklyn Joe is supposed to pin me with his finisher. That's all I know. Okay, he's what's called going over me, winning the match, I'm losing, and we have to work backwards on how we're going to get there. And there's a very specific set of ways of going about planning for a match that usually cause them the most amount of excitement in front of a crowd. So we'll go backwards. Okay, so the finish is you're going to hit me with your big move and you're going to pin me 1, 2, 3, blah blah blah. Okay, so how do we get there? Well, before that, you'll give me like a spot where I'm fighting back, trying to get back up and win, and you just turn around, slam me, finish 1, 2, 3. Okay, now we go back further and then work our way back through the match backwards. Sometimes it's just a communication inside the ring. We'll get up close and we'll talk like in a hold, or he's got me in a headlock. We'll actually communicate from there.
Hmm.
And we'll say, hey, okay, throw me off and I'll you hit me with a clothesline or something. And then you throw him off and go, boom, done. That kind of stuff happens. And this is the kind of stuff that where I'm going to preface this by saying a lot of the things that I'm going to be talking about when it comes to professional wrestling, especially in this arena, I'm intentionally pulling the curtain back here a little bit because I feel like that it's more important to show why professional wrestling is so amazing and so cool and so intricate in that respect. Because it's almost like, are you familiar with the Mysteries of Magic Revealed series from
Um,
like late to early 2000s ish?
like something's coming up, but I don't
It
remember
was
the
the
early
Masked
2000s.
Magician, and all it was Fox had this show called Mysteries of Magic Revealed, and
Oh, okay, yeah.
all he would do is just take major magic tricks and then reveal how it was done.
Hmm.
And it was this cool thing in the like I said, late 90s, early 2000s. I can't remember exactly what it was, but the point of that was, or at least at the time, is that they wanted to pull the curtain back on that stuff to show how amazing and technical the actual magic was. Yeah, obviously it's magic, but magic isn't real, just
Hmm.
like professional wrestling isn't real. You know, and I say isn't real in the sense that it's predetermined. We're not really actually hitting each other for the most part. Um, but there are times where, sometimes you need to see some of the magic behind the scenes to appreciate how much work goes into this stuff.
Hmm. Yeah, I appreciate that because that is a fascinating aspect, kind of behind the curtain, especially when you don't know it and you hear the intricacy. That I think that it evokes a lot of passion in a lot of people to, at the very least, try it out and see it for themselves. For the art, so the bouts themselves can be predetermined. Are do the players' characters? I don't know the nomenclature how to say this appropriately, but do they have arcs for seasons? Do they like work out like this is they were going to lose like 12 in a row in a certain way so that when they have a comeback on the 12th one, like there's a big like roar for it? Like how much is this is like written in advance, and then is it kind of like Star Wars in the sense that like there's like a group of people that like keep a continuity of the arcs as things go through, like, and then how do the players play into the arcs? So, I mean, that's a really big question, but I'm curious, like the longevity of the arcs, how well they're determined, and then like how are they controlled, and then how do the players play into developing their arcs as they go? Because you have people like The Rock, or these other people that like I think even if you had no idea what WWE, like you hear some of their like catchphrases and some of their arcs just in like the regular day. So I'm curious, like how are those developed?
So once again, I hate saying this, but it depends. It depends on what company you work for. It depends on who you're working with. A place like WWE, absolutely, that stuff is built long term. You're talking months. They have a full set of creative writers, a creative writing staff that are based on, in some cases, they pull from different walks of television life. Like for a while there, they were bringing in soap opera writers. Sometimes they were bringing Freddie Prinze Jr. is probably the most well-known WWE writer from outside the professional wrestling business, that came in and wrote a bunch of stuff for WWE. Sometimes it's other wrestlers writing this stuff in WWE. In some of the smaller independent wrestling organizations, there's a place called Chikara that it's pretty much dead now. Some pieces live on in different organizations, but Chikara was very, very storyline driven, to the point where they had their own comic. There were the characters that they were playing were almost superhuman in some ways, or supernatural. They had something called the Ant Colony, and they had a bunch of different characters that were truly character-based wrestling. And like I said, they had a comic book that supplemented it. And in other places where it's just like one-off, two-off matches, like a Squared Circle Wrestling from upstate New York, they closed in about 2015, but they were all about okay, what happens if these two guys faced these two guys? Let's see what happens. And that's all the story was. It was this cool marquee match. And a lot of independent wrestling organizations, especially the small to medium ones, tend to fall on that because it's the greatest way to pull in fans as quickly as possible. Because at the end of the day, this is a business. We're trying to make money. Everyone's trying to make money. The wrestlers are trying to make money. The promoters are trying to make money. The staff there are renting out the building. Everybody's trying to make money off of all of this. So it's definitely a depending factor. But even still, when, like, for instance, this happened more in the 90s, you'd have a car group of guys going from show to show to show. A good example of this would be like currently WWE, what do you call him? An administrator, I guess you'd call him. He's an on-screen administrator, Adam Pearce. Adam Pearce and Colt Cabana were well known in the indies for the NWA World Championship. They traded the NWA World Championship back and forth through different territories and different promotions. And while technically each promotion was their own entity, they had this built-in storyline of they were always constantly feuding. But in reality, they were just driving down the road like everybody else. Mm-hmm. So there's little bits and pieces of that in every single story.
Makes sense. What's your fascination with it? Is it the stories? Is it the physicality of it? Is it the energy of seeing it live? Like what are the, and maybe it's just like a spaghetti bit of everything, but what are the angles that you're really excited about when it comes to WWE and wrestling in general?
Basically, yes. I mean, everything about it's always been there's always been some sort of different aspect of it that fascinates me, from the storyline driven things. Like everyone has this thought about hating your boss. Well, they played that out in the late 90s with Stone Cold Steve Austin and the boss Vince McMahon in WWF/WWE. That was one of the biggest, hottest angle storylines of all time, because it was the ultimate in what a normal person would have deal with from a day-to-day life. Yeah, I don't like my boss. Well, this redneck jerk is just going up and beating up his own boss, and his boss can't do anything about it because he made the guy makes him so much money. It was the ultimate in living out almost a fantasy in that respect. You know, being able to say, yeah, I'm good enough for this job, so much so that I'm beating up my own boss when he, you know, tells me to go stuff it, you know. And, you know, stuff like that always interests me. I also am interested in the carnival or the carny aspect of professional wrestling. Outside of professional wrestling, I do a lot of different things that fall in that gray area. You know, I play poker. I do security research. So I'm dabbling in that stuff. So I know a lot about social engineering and all that fun stuff. And, you know, just there's a lot of different pieces of that kind of sing to my heart, so to speak. And then from the physicality aspect of it, being able to see somebody do some really cool athletic moves, be able to sell a, you know, somebody throwing a punch in such a way that they're not hitting you, but you make it look like they're hitting you is so cool. I mean, just having that ability to do that is just, it's so amazing to me. And it's always been something that I've always been, you know, enamored with throughout the years. I've been a lifelong wrestling fan. I'm 37 years old. I've been watching this stuff since I was 7. You know, this has been basically my life.
Are there, in terms of in person or online, when you can watch online, I imagine in person is just electrically different than just like watching something on a screen. So then what are some of the events in the last 30 years that really stand out to you that you went to in person? And what were the story arcs playing out that really were exciting for you?
I
I mean,
think,
there's a lot. Yeah.
yeah, I've done so many events. I've, you know, worked so many events. I've been a fan of so many events. Probably my biggest one is probably the most recent one, the WrestleMania 34. 34. I'm going to say it's 34. It was the one in most recent one in New Orleans. It featured probably the last real in-person match of The Undertaker. It was also following a storyline arc of an undefeated female Joshi wrestler named Asuka facing her big opponent in Charlotte Flair, the daughter of the legendary Ric Flair, who was the champion at the time. And it was a big storyline of, will she defeat the undefeated challenger, or will the undefeated challenger continue with a title? That was a whole big thing. And of course there was, that was also a Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar, if you're not familiar with him outside of professional wrestling, he was in UFC. He was a Minnesota Viking for a cup of coffee. The man is just amazingly athletically gifted, unlike anybody else I've ever seen in my life. So, but yeah, that was probably my favorite one as a fan. As a performer, some of the shows I worked for, I worked at Excite Wrestling in Binghamton, New York a lot. Probably the biggest show there was probably the one where we had Ricochet and Johnny Gargano on the show. And just being able to talk with them after the fact, just being able to converse with them. And that's the nice part, is that I got to meet a lot of people through that locker room that you see on WWE TV now. So.
Is there could you imagine a universe where you step in the ring? Is that like something you'd ever want to do? Or
I have.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've been trained by Mark House and Colin Delaney. In fact, if you are looking right here, that is me in a 5-on-5 match. But yeah, it just having the ability to work a match, be able to script stuff out, be able to do my own storylines, being able to do all that stuff has been amazing for me. Being able to do that is very rare, and that's part of the reason why I'm more willing to pull back the curtain a little bit more, because it shows what type of history is within professional wrestling as well.
Yeah. When it comes to just going to an event, so for people who are, they're learning about WWE right now and wrestling through us, how would you suggest they get the most out of an event? Like I think the big thing would be going to something nearby, and there's a lot. I mean, I was looking at online, and there's something going on all over across the nation, in the U.S. If you're in the Europe, I don't know how that works, but how would you suggest they get the most out of it? Is there like rituals that you do? Like I know, like for football, they do like tailgating and stuff. I don't know if that's in wrestling as well, but like, what are the things that you do if you were just a fan going to enjoy a match to get the most out of the match?
Right
just
now,
like pure enjoyment. Yeah.
just buy a ticket.
That's it.
I mean, it just once you go to your first show, you'll understand. It's one of those things where it's hard to pinpoint what you want out of it until you experience it. For me, it's going to be different than for you, which is going to be different than one of your listeners, which is going to be different depending on even in the region that you're in. And it's going to be different for what show you go to. Like if you go to a WWE show versus the main competitor to WWE currently right now is AEW, All Elite Wrestling. And they're they have their own TV deal. So they're pretty big. They're owned by the son of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Son of the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars, Tony Khan. But there's all sorts of indie events as well. There's I hate to say local, but because they've gone everywhere, including in Japan right now, and they're going to Europe soon too. GCW, Game Changer Wrestling. They're known for being more of a violent professional wrestling. So they're using like thumbtacks, pizza cutters, light tubes. They're breaking stuff all over each other, and the feelings that you get with that kind of stuff are going to be significantly different than a PG related product like WWE, where it's more about athleticism and storyline driven progression. So my suggestion to you and to your listeners is take a look at what's local, buy a ticket, take a look, see if you like it. If there's some pieces of it that you like it and others that you don't, like maybe you don't like match wrestling. Some people don't. So be it. There are other promotions out there. There's other ways to enjoy this product. It's not just one thing. One of the things that I absolutely love, and there's not enough of, is comedic style wrestling. And there's a big promotion in Japan called DDT that's really into comedic wrestling. Chikara also had that to a lesser extent. Kaiju Big Battle is another one that works out of New York, which is basically exactly what it sounds like if you're familiar at all with kaiju. Is basically literally oversized monsters wrestling in a wrestling ring. They're literally oversized, like Godzilla wrestling in an oversized Godzilla costume. It's craziness. And I love every second of it.
That sounds fun.
And that's kind of the point of where professional wrestling came from, is that wrestling was a piece of the three-ring circus. And professional wrestling done correctly kind of mimics the three-ring circus in the fact that you are there's going to be something for everybody. There should be a comedy match on the show. There should be some sort of semi-violent match. There should be something that's athletic. Should be something that's more lucha based. There should be something that's, big meaty men slapping meat, type of thing. It's just, there's going to be different things for everyone if it's done correctly. And that's the key thing about professional wrestling as a whole, is that there should be something for everybody. And for good or bad, sometimes that stuff gets, fetishized, if nothing else. Sometimes women's wrestling gets fetishized. Sometimes ultra-violent wrestling gets fetishized. But the reality is that some people just like it because it's interesting. Like for me personally, I'm a huge fan of what's called Joshi wrestling. once again, in Japan, female wrestlers will just, it's just basically fighting, hard hitting professional wrestling. But in the US, you don't see that as much anymore, or frankly, not until now, when WWE's put more of a emphasis on it now, where it's not the 2-minute bathroom break match. It's not all about the bra and panties matches of the 2000s and 90s era. It's actually professional wrestling done by women. And I think that's one of the greatest things about this, is it's showing, not just men, but women can do this kind of stuff. And it does show a great deal of respect to the product as a whole.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of versatility. So it's really just get in there, try something, and then, play into it. Because I think something that's really missing nowadays is that there was like this big trend of going online in terms of like, especially COVID accelerating this. But then there's such a dearth of things that are in person and live that now that there's something like this that it's going to open up a lot of listeners' eyes into something new. I think that would be really exciting for a friend group going and trying something new. Are there like tiers to the seating, or is it like one ticket for all?
It depends on the show.
Yeah.
WWE does tiered seating. AEW does tiered seating. Ring of Honor does do like a couple of rows and then general admission. Most indie shows will sell the front row and then general admission. For the most part, unless it's a big arena, general admission's fine for your first show.
Sweet. For when you're wrestling and when you wrestle, what's the support to do the job in terms of like, you're doing a lot of work, you're doing a lot of choreography, and you'll be doing a lot of shows, as you said, like for I think WWE, there's like 300 plus shows a year. What's the like the medical support, the infrastructural support, so you can do your best at each match? Like, how does that actually like structurally look like?
Well, the not great part is that there isn't much. Each state has their own regulation when it comes to professional wrestling. Some states are better than others. Some states, it's just more expensive to run a show. In New York State, you have to have an ambulance sitting there. You cannot run a show without an ambulance. You cannot run a show without a doctor on site. You cannot run a show without insurance on the show. In Delaware or New Jersey, none of that's needed. So it's completely different depending on the state. So it's usually left up to the professional wrestler themselves to make sure that they're getting the medical care that they need, that they're doing the basically the stretching and the exercise that they need to get through a match. For me personally, I am trained. The last 5 or 6 years, I've been doing just non-wrestling stuff, but I'll be like ringside being a manager and just showing off the guy that I'm, saying is the next big thing, type of thing. But even stuff like that, I slip and fall all the time. I'll take bumps all the time. I will get physical in the ring, and sometimes happens. I've been hit with chairs. I've been hit with my own cane. I come to the ring with a cane. I've been hit with all sorts of different things. I've taken moves left, right, and center. But if something happened to me, in that respect, I'm going to the hospital. I better have health insurance. And there's a lot of people in the wrestling business that don't.
Is that, if you could design, if you were, I guess, building your own wrestling organization, is that how you'd keep it? Or is there an optimal way that takes care of the wrestler while keeping costs at a level that doesn't add too much overhead? Like, how would you set things up?
The problem,
it's up to you.
Yeah. The problem right now with professional wrestling is it's still listed as an independent contractor. Every single professional wrestler, including all the way up to WWE, are independent contractors. They're not employees of whatever organization they're doing. Now, from a legal standpoint, it's been played around with a lot in court. There are many different other arenas outside of professional wrestling that have been kind of iffy about independent contractorship. key cases like Uber and Lyft and DoorDash and all that stuff are having an actual effect on this. So the reality is that at what point do you no longer are considered an independent contractor and now are an employee and are required to have health insurance based on state laws and based on federal laws, and make sure that you have certain things like days off. Once again, when you talk about a WWE wrestler, they're on the road 300 days a year. They don't necessarily get vacation days. They don't get holidays off. They're an independent contractor. That's what they do. You know, when Monday Night Raw happens and it's on Labor Day, they're still going to be there, you know? And that's the thing, is that nowadays, I'm not sure how it looks because there's no unions in professional wrestling. There's no grouping of people to get together and stuff. And just me even saying the word union in professional wrestler will get me thrown out of most any promotion. But the reality is it's needed for multiple different reasons. I think that running a professional wrestling organization, even in 2022, is so hard. And without a ton of money behind you, it's just not worth doing, because at the end of the day, you're still trying to run a business. It's not easy to do.
Yeah. 300 days a year. I can't imagine a profession that's more physical than that in terms of what you're doing. Or entertainment or any field. I mean, I think even like the military, like you have days off. I mean, you'd have to be like actively in a war zone to have like 300 straight days
Right.
of like preparing for something like that. That's a lot. Is the do they make enough to take care of themselves in that way? Like, I don't know the average mean and median for the pay scale. Outside of the passion and for doing it, I imagine there's a lot of people that just do it for that reason. Do people make enough where they can take care of themselves, take care of their families?
Depends.
Yeah.
That's the short answer. Guys that you're basically a made guy once you go to WWE or AEW right now. And those salaries, and I use the word salary very, very loosely here. But just your downside guarantees where you get this amount per year, no matter what. Okay. That kind of stuff is, how are you saying? You're seeing like 100,000 for like the low to mid range. But it's not unheard of to make millions of dollars in professional wrestling. You know, 5 million, 10 million. Brock Lesnar was making, I think it was like $5 million and 15 matches the 1 year. You know, if you were a big enough draw, they'll pay you whatever. There's a gentleman named CM Punk, Phil Brooks, that was signed to AEW recently. And he was, the rumor is that he was making 8 figures with them.
Okay.
Obviously, because it was a private company, that kind of information is only like between you, me, and the other person over here that overheard them talking, type of thing. So you're never sure about stuff like that. WWE is a little bit different. They're a public entity. They're a publicly traded company. You could figure out exactly what everyone's making, but in AEW you can't because they're a private company. But the people that own AEW have more money than God right now. I mean, they are multi millionaires, if not billionaires. So they can afford to throw money at people to make their product good. As for the independent side, not so much. It's not unheard of to see people making $25 a show, and sometimes not even that, especially when you're getting out. You're just working for free. And when I mean working, you're putting up the ring, you're putting out the seats, you're cleaning the stuff up, you're putting pipe and drape up, you go through your match, maybe you're helping with their catering. People are gone, you sweep up, you pull up the chairs, you take down the ring, you put the ring into the truck, and you go, and you may not even see a dime. And that happens a lot, especially in the first few years of professional wrestling, when you're still getting out, you're still trying to make a name for yourself. Maybe you get a match, maybe you don't, Maybe you just drove there just to get in front of a promoter, just to say hi, hi, this is my value to you. I can do this stuff. I can promote your show. I can also give you a match too while you're at it, but it's, and professional wrestling as a whole is still not gotten out of that. There's one of the biggest problems in professional wrestling as a whole is that you're expected to know things that nobody teaches you. You can be in a school for professional wrestling for 6 months and not know just simple etiquette things or simple ways on how to market yourself to a promoter. That's where guys like Brutal Bob Evans come into play, where he has his own little separate course on how to become not just become a professional wrestler, but make it a profitable entrepreneurship. And that's the kind of the key things where it's not just about the professional wrestling getting paid for that, but it's also being paid for merchandise, and one of my favorite quotes of this gentleman right here, actually, Kevin Steen, now Kevin Owens, is that he always thought he was a great wrestler, but he never knew that to be a successful professional wrestler, he had to be a great t-shirt salesman. And he made many multitudes of hundreds and thousands of dollars just by selling t-shirts, not because he was a great wrestler. He was a great wrestler, don't get me wrong. And WWE is proving that because he's still working with them for like 7-8 years now. But he was also really good at marketing himself and marketing his merchandise to the point where he could actually survive solely on his professional wrestling and provide for his family. Because when he was on the indies, he literally had a kid and a second on the way just before he left for WWE.
Wow. So I think that's a good overview. And I know we wanted to jump into this WWE Logan Paul versus Roman Reigns. I want to make sure we have enough time to talk about this.
Yes.
So I literally learned about this like last week in preparation for this interview. I did not know Logan Paul was going into WWE. I know the Pauls are getting into like boxing, physical stuff. And I think it's because people really like seeing them get hit, I suspect. But what are your thoughts on this?
Okay. Now, you've probably figured out that I'm pretty much a big fan of Japanese culture, Japanese wrestling, Japanese this and that. So it'll come to no surprise to you that I don't have the best feelings for Logan Paul for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Suicide Forest and whatnot. I will say this. This is not his first match in WWE. This is like his third or fourth. Logan Paul has a work ethic that shocks me every single time I see him walk into any avenue, whether it's boxing, professional wrestling, YouTube, whatever. Okay. I don't like the guy, but I respect the work ethic. And the things he's done in professional wrestling is super critical to the reason why he's there in the first place, why WWE wanted him in the first place. The reason why we're talking about him right now is exactly the reason why he's in WWE. You're not necessarily a fan of professional wrestling, but you know who Logan Paul is. You know what he does. So to get people that don't necessarily watch professional wrestling to watch professional wrestling is great. And it makes not just WWE a ton of money, but it actually trickles down as well. Well, that stuff over there, that has Logan Paul in it. That might be cool. Oh, look, there's a local independent wrestling show that's like $10. We can go and see that. That might be similar to the same thing. And most of the time it is. Sometimes it's a little bit less quality because, you're talking the difference between somebody that's working in professional wrestling for 25 years versus somebody who's been working for maybe 3 to 5. But the philosophy is still the same, is that it trickles down in that respect. So to see celebrities in WWE and to get more eyes on the product that aren't necessarily WWE fans is a huge boon. And it's actually a very, very big deal for any professional wrestling fan. And of course, professional wrestling fans on the internet will complain about absolutely anything for any reason at all. I know I've been complaining about it for 10 years on the Wrestling Show podcast. So I've been there. Okay. But the reality is that you can't get away from the fact that a major star has walked into a company that maybe even 5 years ago wouldn't have attracted somebody like that. So
what is the work ethic that he brought to WWE? You know, for people unfamiliar, I'm not familiar. What did he do that really surprised and like made you more welcoming of him that you referenced a minute ago?
Training. When celebrities walk into the professional wrestling business for the first time, most of the time it's okay, we're going to do one match. Let's literally walk through every single spot you're going to do. We had this conversation in the beginning of this show where some guys will literally one by one, by bit, figure out exactly what you're doing. And it's nothing more than two actors fighting in a movie. A lot of celebrities that come into the ring do exactly that. This is exactly how it's going to go. And the professional wrestler, the actual professional wrestler in the ring, will walk them literally through the match. They'll what's called carry the other person through the match, call everything, make sure that they're in the right position for everything. If they're off by a little bit, they rein them in a little bit. Logan Paul has done unbelievable things in terms of training on figuring out how to actually wrestle. It's not just about, hey, let's just get through this match by doing this spot, this spot, this spot. He's actually going day after day after day, training, making sure he's doing bumps, making sure that when he does a move or receives a move, it's done smoothly. Everything he does in the ring is really smooth because he's practicing, because he's training, because he's doing all this stuff. And it shows a respect to professional wrestling that most celebrities don't have. They're like, oh, I'm a fan. This is what I'm going to do. And with all due respect to guys like Snoop Dogg, who's done one move, oh my goodness, to the WWE Hall of Famer, Donald Trump, he did things in the professional wrestling business that are like, yikes. Maria Menounos, even if you go further back, like even Cyndi Lauper was involved with stuff, and just professional wrestling and celebrities have been hand in hand in a lot of that stuff, but it's always been a one-shot thing, one spot here, one spot there. Another more recent one is Johnny Knoxville from Jackass fame. They did a great match in WrestleMania, but he was one of those guys that he knew exactly what he was there for. He knew exactly what spot was going to happen, and that was it. They did a great job of it, but it was only meant to be a one-spot thing. Logan's really trying to make this a thing he does. You know what I mean? It's not just we're just going to do a one spot thing and call it a day. Pat McAfee is another one like that, where it's not just a one spot and make it done. He's actually doing multiple matches. Even though technically he's a celebrity, he's a former punter, I want to say. I'm not as familiar with football as most guys for some reason. But he was like a very well-known kicker, punter. I don't know. But he transitioned to professional wrestling. He's a great commentator, and he also can do matches, and it's really great. And Logan Paul falls in that same category, where he's putting in the effort to actually do these types of matches. And that's part of the reason why this show in Saudi Arabia is such a big deal, because it's against basically the top guy in WWE right now, Roman Reigns. And it's for the titles, the top titles. And obviously, endings are predetermined. But this is a main event of a very, very well-known show in a arena that's going to have a ton of fans and is going to be broadcast all around the world. And he's been given a main event spot on that show. And that says everything you need to know about how much they believe in Logan Paul. Previously, he was in the mid card of WrestleMania. Yeah, he was an attraction, but it wasn't the top attraction there. Now he is the top attraction. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes. About where it is a whole nother subject for maybe another show. I'm not sure if you want to go deeper into that, but I'll let you drive that.
Yeah. Well, it just sounds like he, other than just bringing eyes to the profession, I think something I'm hearing from you is he showed respect to the sport, to the profession itself, and that's always that is a really encouraging thing to hear. That it's not just like a one off or like a disrespectful thing to make money. I mean, it's all good to make money, but it's like I think there's if you actually care about what you're doing, that's so much more fun. What why is it in Saudi Arabia? I think when I think WD, I think of America. Like why isn't it not like in like Madison Square Garden or I don't know, like build a whole new little stage in the middle of like Podunk Midwest and then bring everyone out.
Well, they do that too, for one, but
Yeah, but why is this one not? Is there like a thing?
yeah, there's a thing. It's a big thing. So I want to say it was about 4 or 5 years ago. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia reached out to WWE and a couple other sports too. You what is it, live golf or whatever. There's a golf thing and there's something else that was a big deal. And one of the things that Saudi Arabia wanted to do was to reach out to the rest of the world basically and show off the new Saudi Arabia, how we're a lot more modern than we thought, than most people think we are, and we're a lot more, we're more accepting of people. And I think it was more of a propaganda thing for the rest of the world to say, hey, we're not as bloodthirsty, jerks as everyone thinks we are. And one of the big deals with that was that they contracted with WWE to the tune of, I think it was $1 billion.
Wow.
$1 billion for 2 shows a year for 10 years. Now, I don't know how you are financially speaking. I don't,
Not billions.
I would have a hard time if I was running any company at all. Now, keep in mind, WWE is a big company. Big. They're a publicly traded company. Vince McMahon at the time was worth over $1 billion himself. Okay. When somebody goes to you and says, I would like you to run 20 professional wrestling shows, things you already do. You already have the equipment, the people. I just want you to come over on a plane, run the shows, 20 shows. And in return, I will give you $1 billion.
Sounds like
sign me the fuck up. I mean, you can't not, okay? Especially when you're a publicly traded company. And if your shareholders heard that you turned something like that down, you would be the one on the top block.
Yeah. They can sue you, right? Mm-hmm. That's one of the reasons why Elon doesn't want to bring SpaceX to public. It's because they would sue over short-term profit margin.
Exactly. And that's why WWE did it. This was before the Kamal Khashoggi. I don't remember his name. He was an American journalist that was based in Saudi Arabia and just so happened to disappear after he was critical of the Crown Prince. And it was pretty well known that they killed him and covered it up. But it's always been a touchy subject whenever these Saudi shows are brought up, because you're basically being paid with blood money. And I've always been on the side of, yeah, they should probably have canceled they have an out at that point. They could say, no, we shouldn't be doing this. They instead are choosing to keep going there and keep doing these shows and keep basically getting blood money, because every single time they get so much more money. They get around 50 million a show. So it's like, I'm conflicted about it. I personally would have pulled out. There are certain wrestlers that will not go to those shows. There are certain, like the first few shows, they would not allow women wrestlers on the show. because the
Yeah.
whole deal with that. Now they're allowing them to happen, but they have to have special gear. They have to be fully, like literally fully from toe to finger all the way up to here, have to be fully covered, to be able to wrestle. And it's just that philosophy of look at what you're doing, what you're giving up from a non-monetary standpoint to do these shows is just, ugh. And I've always had a problem with it personally, but
Will you yeah. I see the complexity of it. Will you be going like in person or doing the PPP? Or are you and your group gonna like boycott it or something? I don't know how people to handle that type of thing.
At this point, we just watch it because we review them. The wrestling show with Sleazy and the Fat Man. I'm Sleazy, obviously. What we do on the podcast is we review the most recent special events, premium live events, depending on what's out there. Like this past week, we reviewed a WWE event. 2 weeks from now, we'll review an AEW event. We'll also be reviewing this Saudi show. So we watch these shows. It's not like we're not going to watch this show, but it's, what are you going to do? You can, the thing is that boycotting the show doesn't work in WWE's land, because to boycott it, you're unsubscribing to a monthly service.
Okay.
I mean, okay, I'll unsubscribe for a week. And what are they going to do? Oh my goodness, I lost $9.99 a month. And in the United States, it's not even that. WWE Network, the streaming service that is given to, for subscribers to watch all the premium live events, it's not actually its own service anymore. It's tied to Peacock. So to watch these shows, you're actually watching them through the Peacock app. So when you actually boycott the show, you're not even boycotting WWE, you're boycotting Peacock, which makes no sense at all. So there's no point in doing it anymore. And to be fair, the other professional wrestling networks like High Spots, New Japan World, and IWTV, and all the other ones that are out there, you might be able to make a dent in that stuff, but WWE is this massive ball, and it's going to roll whether you're on it or not. So
that makes sense. Yeah, I guess in a perfect world, if you were making the decisions and you could put it anywhere on the globe, including Antarctica, if you really wanted to, where would you set it? Where would you set up the Logan Paul and Roman match?
Dallas, Texas, specifically in the big dome that's there. I'm drawing a blank of what it's called now.
I think I can picture it. I think most people can picture it. It's huge.
Yeah, it's humongous. I could see them trying to run it to fit over 100,000 people in there. That's how I would do it. The only other place that might actually do that type of show, and especially if you had the right backing and you didn't want to step on any toes, you do it with New Japan Pro Wrestling and run it in the Tokyo Dome.
Is the Tokyo Dome bigger than Dallas? I can't imagine many things are bigger than Dallas.
It's big. It's pretty big. It's I wouldn't say it's the biggest. I think there's a venue in South Korea that currently holds the record for the most people in an arena. That's like 180,000 or some ridiculous number that nobody can actually prove. But we
gotta step it up. We gotta get a bigger stadium. We have all the land for it.
Yeah, right. I don't know who. I guess it's the Cowboys Stadium. I guess I don't know for sure.
I would imagine Cowboys. Yeah.
My sports knowledge is like this, but I know it's a huge arena. The indoor attendance record was set in there with the 2010 NBA All-Star game. And that was 108,000 people. So if WWE could do that with Logan Paul versus Roman Reigns, I would run it there too. but they make more money by doing it in Saudi. Because I guarantee you, the Saudi Crown Prince said, "Yes, I would like Logan Paul, please."
Yeah.
So but
yeah, makes sense. So then, if I mean, you can't like predict the storyline too much, but if you were writing it, if you were in the writers' room for the Logan Paul Roman match, what would be some of the things that would happen in your mind? Like, what would be the things that you'd be excited to see if you could be either a part of it or just as a fan? It's fine if you want to dissect your brain or segment it in that way.
So you're basically asking me how I would book it, right? So like from the moment they start the match to the end.
Yeah. How would you love to see it? Just the yeah.
My thought would be my philosophy in booking matches in general, especially when you're talking about a big match like this, is you want to make sure that both people look good at the end, even though one has to lose, one has to win. So in this type of match, Logan Paul is relatively new, so to speak, to professional wrestling. So there's no reason for him to win this match. So Roman's got to win here. So if you look at it from that and work your way backwards, the best probably way to do it is to have Logan Paul do a bunch of things early in the match, work it through so that he looks good. And then because Roman's considered the bad guy in this feud, in this match, Roman would probably have somebody come down and distract Logan Paul before Roman beat him. So that's probably how it's going to go. And that's probably the best way it should go. In my opinion, it still makes Logan Paul look good. He went one-on-one with the top guy in WWE and he may have lost, but he looks good in defeat. It took one of Roman's guys to help him to beat Logan Paul. Will that happen? Who knows? We don't know because that stuff obviously very secretive because you want to keep that secret.
Yeah.
But that's how I would do it.
Is it possible to have one of those like Rocky moments where like the fists are coming at the same time so you can't tell who won? You know, in the sense of like a tie without it being a tie? Like how could you like obfuscate it in that way?
There's actually a term for it. It's called a dusty finish. And the dusty finish is it was coined by a man named Dusty Rhodes. Cody Rhodes' father, Dustin Rhodes' father. He was a very well-known booker and professional wrestler, 70s, 80s. Also well-known for facing Ric Flair a bunch of times in the NWA. And one of the key things to a dusty finish is that you'll have one guy win, looks like he won, but the ref's knocked out and he didn't actually win. Or one person will be in a submission hold and they're tapping out, but at the same time they're being pinned and the referee's counting the 1, 2, 3 and the other person wins. And then there's some, question of who actually won first. Was the referee correct? Additionally, there's things like double countouts where both guys are fighting outside the ring and they have till a count of 10 to get back into the ring. Otherwise they both lose and it's a draw. Same with double disqualifications where they're both fighting with weapons and they shouldn't be, or something of that nature. There's multiple ways that you can do a draw like that, especially in different types of matches, not just regular matches.
I could see, something like that happen, and then there's like a rematch. So then, like it builds even further, kind of like bubbling of water. What has allowed Roman to be the champion for so long? Like, how has he retained the title, especially if there's like arcs to it?
So, in terms of how they're building the storyline with him,
yeah. What's like externally, like from a story standpoint, what's allowing him to maintain it, and then internally, like behind the curtains, what do you think's keeping him there?
Externally, they're doing a good job of making him this badass, unbeatable bad guy. And there is nothing better in professional wrestling than a good guy chasing a bad guy, especially at the top. That's what makes the most money in general. And that's always been a pretty much well-known opinion of professional wrestling booking. It's a booking concept. Um, in terms of why it's Roman specifically,
Yeah.
is because his cousin's The Rock. He's from the legendary family that includes Afa, Sika, Yokozuna, The Rock, pretty much everybody in the Samoan dynasty. So there's a long history of professional wrestling within his family. So he is a wrestler. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
He bleeds this business pretty much unlike most anybody else, even in the business. So there's that sense of respect there. Additionally, Roman has done a great job of, for lack of a better term, selling merchandise. Even as a bad guy, he's one of the top sellers of merchandise in WWE, which is not normal, actually. Most of the time, he'll sell tickets, bad guys sell tickets, faces, good guys sell merchandise. Because you want to support the good guy, but you want to buy the ticket to see the bad guy get beat up. And that's a big philosophy of professional wrestling. So to have a guy like Roman, who is traditionally a bad guy and has been a bad guy for a long time, still selling a lot of merchandise is unique in this situation. And that's why he's been champion for nearly 2 years. So, and when that happens, when that bubble bursts, when Roman finally loses that match and that title, it's going to explode. And the question is, who is it going to be, and how much of a huge megastar will be made because of it?
Who would you want to see defeat him?
Who would I want?
Yeah.
I mean, from a personal opinion, I will always choose guys that I'm very, close with, guys like Kevin Owens. Who should be dethroning him? Probably it's going to be Cody Rhodes. Cody Rhodes is currently, he tore his pec muscle, like clean off the bone. And he's been out for like 5-6 months. There's a possibility he'll be back for next year's WrestleMania. We don't know if that's actually going to happen or not. But if he does come back, he's probably going to be the one that takes the title, because he was poised to be that guy. So
that makes sense. And just circling back on this concept, what do you think's allowing him to have the duality of selling merch but still being the bad guy? Is there some aspect of his arc or storyline, or him just as an entertainer that's allowing it in your mind? Like how is he able to wield both so deftly?
He's good at his job. It's just simple as that. I mean, he has an aura about him that is absolutely untouchable. He has guys that are with him that are great. And once again, they have there's a 3-ring circus within his own little group. You have, you have obviously Roman, the big baddie, the boss. Then you have his cousins, who are tag team champions, who are also twins. And then you have their cousin, who's like this big badass, like mini boss. And then you have a guy that's Sami Zayn, who is completely unrelated to all of them, but has endeared himself into the group. And it's this almost like comedy relief piece within this like very serious group. And it's made this whole dynamic that's really funny, really cool. And just as a general rule, for some reason, professional wrestling fans like to herd towards groups, towards like cliques of some sort. Like this is this iteration with Roman, it's called the Bloodline. But before then there was like the Nexus, and if you want to talk back in like 2000s, you had the NWO, and the NWO was the reason why WCW was so popular in 1998 till 2000. They were the reason why they were beating WWE for so long, was because of this angle called the NWO, and it was all about groups and the wolf pack and all that stuff. And as you look through Life and Times, some of the best storylines are done through faction-based wrestling. A group of guys versus a group of guys, and it allows for a lot of different mini storylines within them. Yeah, the two factions are fighting, but Jeff and Joe over there really hate each other. So, or Jeff and Joe's sister are now, an item, and that's a whole new storyline, and there's all sorts of cool things like that. And I think that with the bloodline here with Roman, they've done a great job of playing up a lot of different storylines within the main storyline of Roman being this big invincible boss.
It makes a lot of sense. There's just a lot of stuff. It's like kind of like this is like a weird comparison, but it's like Romeo and Juliet. Like those like really timeless stories of like two families who hate each other, and whether it's romance or just even like romances or whatever, it like puts them at odds. That's really interesting. Is there anything that's I guess like maybe underplayed, or arcs or ways of doing storytelling that you feel like don't get as much attention, but they're like a little bit more subtle that you enjoy?
A comedy wrestling.
Yeah, comedy.
Is a big one. A lot of it's very divisive. You either really like comedy wrestling or you really don't. My co-host is definitely not a comedy wrestling fan. So a lot of his stuff is more about, hard hitting, strong style stuff, technique and all that stuff. I'm a lot more whimsical when it comes to professional wrestling. If you can make me laugh during a professional wrestling match, it's that much better for me.
Are there so comedy as the genre, do they still have the similar story structure? They just have the comedy added to it, or do they go in an entirely different direction in like telling the stories?
Sometimes. One of the bigger comedy acts right now is a gentleman named Orange Cassidy. Orange Cassidy works for AEW. His character is, he is the equivalent of a sloth. He gets into the ring slow. He does everything slow, and
that type.
It's just everything's just whatever, man. But the way it's done in a regular match is so wonderfully executed, and the fact that he can change it up to face like some real, like if you put him against like a Roman Reigns, who's a very serious wrestler, he's there to beat the crap out of you and you're going to get a completely different match, because his style of professional wrestling is different, but it does fit into the mold of a normal match. Whereas some of the stuff in like DDT, pro wrestling in Japan, it can be anything. At one point, one guy got pinned by a ladder for the 24/7 championship. So there is an actual, in their records, there is a listing of the DDT heavy metalweight champion this holder was a ladder. He's actually a multiple time champion, that ladder. That's a kind of stupid, ridiculous stuff that happens in that type of professional wrestling. And there's a common spot in Chikara where they had a fake grenade go off, and it was an invisible grenade. Another one is Bryce Rensburg, a friend of the show, now an AEW referee. One of the cool things he did a couple years ago at a professional wrestling event is he reffed a match between the Invisible Man and Invisible Stan. No joke. It was probably one of my favorite matches in the last couple of years in terms of comedy, because Bryce is so good at doing all sorts of different movements, gestures, that kind of stuff, to like sketch comedy, prop comedy, improv, all that stuff. Made this match into an amazing moment. You can find it free on YouTube. I could probably send you guys a link to it. But it is a great example of how broad professional wrestling can go in terms of what you can see and what you can experience out there. And this was in the same show that included a no ring death match, or no rope barbed wire death match, I think. Maybe it had light tubes in it. I can't remember. But it was the same show. Point being.
Wow. The barbed wire would have me concerned getting near that rings with all the stuff that they do. Does does this passion of yours, like, how does it affect your personal life? Is this like, do you have like rooms of memorabilia? I don't know, like how does it, maybe this is just like personal and professional, like you've just welded them together so acutely, but I'm curious, how does this passion affect your personal life?
Um, Probably in a few different ways. Number one, I don't do much collecting. In fact, I had to be forced to put these up. This is actually the set of the wrestling show for
Hmm.
me. So I kind of got forced into having something behind me.
It
For
looks
the most
nice.
part, I don't usually like to take pictures. I don't like to take, especially with other professional wrestlers, um, mainly because I feel like it's like taking a picture with your coworker. Unless you're close with them, I, I feel like it feels weird. It's awkward for me.
Yeah.
Um, Other guys are not so much like that. A lot of them have pictures with all sorts of people. For me, professional wrestling, especially me being as a performer, scratches an inch of mine just to be able to perform. But it's also helped me in public speaking circumstances. In my professional life, I do a lot of public speaking about information security and stuff like that. So I'll do webinars. I'll talk to staff about phishing and social engineering and all that kind of stuff. And my life as a professional wrestler has allowed me to take those skills and bring it to that arena, so to speak. Additionally, professional wrestling mainly happens on the weekends. So a lot of times I'm not here on the weekends. Obviously, nowadays I've kind of pulled back from that, but there were times where I was on the road every weekend after working 5 days a week. So there was a lot of long, lonely nights and times where it sucks,
Yeah.
frankly. Being on the road for 6, 7 hours each way, getting back at 4 a.m., 5 a.m. after
Wow.
the show, after you've been hurt, it just it takes a toll on you sometimes.
That's intense. Yeah. I'd wish there'd be like a convoy or something that could go with you, just to at least be entertaining on the drive. That drive after, that's intense. Like
Yeah.
that's a lot of mental strength there alone. Like physically that's something, but just the mentality of driving 14 hours in a day, that's a lot. And most people are like, "Oh, that's not a big deal." Drive 14 hours. Go do it.
Yeah.
And just
It's
imagine everything that you're having to do with on top of that. That's, I mean, I'm glad you've made it safely and that there weren't any, hopefully there were no accidents.
yeah.
Um yes.
you know,
This,
I'm about a year ago, there were four guys from Buffalo. They were coming back from Ottawa, I believe it was, for a show. Um, and on the way back, they caught a bit of ice,
hmm,
slammed in a guardrail, and 2 out of 4 of them were in the hospital for a week. The other two were also very injured, and they were called the Buffalo Boys, because shocker, they're from Buffalo, New York.
that's a good name.
But right, but the four of them were very, very injured because of that, and obviously, you know, in professional wrestling, we're a small group. We try and cover each other as much as possible. We don't always make as much money as we can, but GoFundMe's were done and all that stuff, and we tried our best to help them. 2 out of the 4 of them are one is definitely under contract with AEW now. One works for them on occasion. The other two are very well known indie stars now. And the fact that they went from that in less than a year to very prominent areas where they're making a ton of money just warms my heart, because that could have been the end of their careers
Yeah.
easily. So to see that kind of, and a lot of people don't get that luxury. Guys like Draws, who, you know, had one slip up in the ring and was paralyzed for the rest of his life and
Wow.
died a few years ago. But he spent the rest of his life paralyzed because he got something slipped and something happened and broke his neck. Stone Cold Steve Austin only had a 4 or 5 year long career in WWE because he had his neck broken by the late Owen Hart, who had an accident in the ring and was killed in the ring. The wrestling industry is very much wrought with just a lot of very bad things. People die early in this business, and sometimes it's because of mistakes. Most of the time it's because of the drugs and alcohol that are afterwards. Sometimes it's because of, just poor choices.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't want us to end there, so let's talk
right?
about your.
There we go, heavy downer.
It'd be a funny way. No, you're doing great. I mean, that's you can't. I mean, it's both sides of the coin. It's everything. You have to be able to look at everything. What's your future like? What do you think? What are you planning for in the next year or two for yourself?
Wrapping up my career, basically. We'll be continuing doing the wrestling show. I don't know how long we'll continue it, but we've been around for 10 years. It's always been a standing joke that we're going to be doing the show as long as Colt Cabana does his, because we've always billed ourselves as the second longest running wrestling podcast after Colt's, and Colt just won't stop. If he stops, then we'll stop. But if he ain't stopping, we're not stopping. But yeah, it's in terms of an active in-ring career, I'm probably never going to put a match on ever again. I'll probably do some more managing. I'll probably do more backstage stuff. I may promote a show or two, but I'll probably never get physical in the ring as a normal competitor ever again.
Is there anything that's driving that desire to take a step back?
37 years old and I'm already hurting.
Okay. Yeah, that's enough. You're listening to your body then.
Yeah. I'm 285 pounds. I'm not in the best of shape. Never was in great shape to begin with. I could get through a match, but I'm always like, but yeah, I mean, it was already taking a toll. Wrestling hurts. You may not always get injured, but it always hurts. It does hurt to take a bump. It does hurt to get smacked in the face, as John Stossel will tell you. It does matter. It does to do this stuff. This ain't ballet, as they would say. It is very physical what we do in the ring.
So taking a step back from the physicality of it, but do you still see yourself being a part of the profession? Like the podcast may be a wind down, but are you going to keep doing this for the rest of your life? Is it going to be still a core component of your life in that way?
As long as people will listen, I'll always.
There you go. And where can people check you out? Is there a good way? Do you have if there's one great way for people to just stay up to date? I know you have a website, a WordPress website, if I remember, but
yeah, we have the wrestlingshow.com.
Yeah. Okay, there you go.
You can find us pretty much everywhere, on Facebook, on Twitter. I'll send all the links to you. You name it, we probably have something on there. We do TikTok. We even as a joke, we have an OnlyFans. That's
great.
That was a whole bit that turned into something real. I'm
glad it works for you.
Work is a relative term, I guess, in this. But yeah, it was one of those things where we did it as a bit, and I was like, unless we really grab hold of that, we might have a problem in the future. So we now have an OnlyFans. But yeah, Twitter is the big one. You can find the show at Sleazy Fat Man. Myself is at TWS Sleazy. You can probably find matches of me everywhere. On Excite Wrestling's Twitch page at twitch.tv/ExciteXCITE wrestling. You can find our show in video form on Twitch as well, twitch.tv/Sleazy and the Fat Man.
And just as the last question, why Sleazy?
It was an old nickname from middle school. It was such a dumb story. So you were in middle school. I was in middle school. We were all in middle school, right? We have dumb friends. We were dumb, horny kids and whatnot. And I was trying to get the wiles of a female classmate. And my best friend, Fat Man, said, well, if you're going to go after somebody like her, you're just nothing but a sleazy hoe. And it stuck for 25 years.
Have you grown to love it though?
Have
you grown to love it? Okay, there you go.
Well, I am the king of yes and, you know, I mean, I leaned in so deeply into that. I lean into pretty much everything I do. You know, the podcast started with the original tagline for the wrestling show was two assholes on a $3 mic talking about professional wrestling, because it was literally that, you know, two guys.
Descriptive.
Well, I mean, it was literally a $3 mic that I bought at a Goodwill. You know, that was our entire, you know, setup for 3-4 years, you know, because we didn't have much money at the time. We were both unemployed 10 years ago. I had just gotten away from a job. Fat Man wasn't working all that much, so we had some time to play around with stuff. And it turned into this huge show. And 10 years later, now we're officially, our 10 years is this coming month. And we've got friends from it. We've gone to huge shows. We've gone to many cities because of it. We've, you know, talked to so many great professional wrestlers, so many people that have been involved in business, all sorts of different experiences that we would not have had we not had the professional wrestling podcast. So if nothing else, that's the key thing that I want to take away from the wrestling show, is that it's given us all these experiences that you see in the wall behind me.
Thank you for joining us today with the Learn with Lowell show. Check us out at learnwithlowell.com. Anywhere podcasts can be found, subscribe. Tell me what you thought of this episode. Check us out on YouTube in particular. It's a new thing I'm doing. Timestamps and links are in the show notes. Thank you for coming, and I hope every one of you found something today that you're curious about to learn more about, and you'll go out and be curious and learn something new. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.